The rumors did not stay whispers for long, because jealousy, when left unchecked, always looks for a moment to explode. And that moment came during a high-level system review when a serious error was discovered in the project Nora had led. An error that caused delays and financial risk. And the room immediately turned cold as eyes shifted toward her, some shocked, some almost satisfied, and Nora felt the floor drop beneath her feet as accusations formed without words, because in places like this, blame moves faster than truth. And one of the senior programmers openly questioned her decisions, implying that she had rushed the work to impress the CEO. And another hinted that perhaps she lacked the experience to handle responsibility at that level. And though Nora tried to explain calmly, her voice felt small against the weight of suspicion, because she hadn't created that error. She knew it deep in her bones. Yet proving innocence is always harder than proving skill, and as tension filled the room, Leo Parker watched silently at first, his jaw tight, because he recognized the error too, and he knew it was not hers. But speaking up meant placing himself directly in the line of fire, risking his position, his reputation, and the fragile balance he had maintained with his colleagues. And the CEO observed everyone carefully, saying little, allowing the truth to surface on its own. And Nora stood there, her hands clenched, feeling the old fear return, the fear of being pushed out, misunderstood, judged before being heard. And in that moment, she realized something painful, that no matter how hard she worked, the world would always be ready to doubt her first. And just when the room felt ready to turn against her completely, Leo stepped forward, his voice firm and clear, stating that he had reviewed the logs personally, and that the error appeared only after unauthorized changes were made, changes that did not come from Nora's account. And the room fell silent again, not with laughter or praise, but with shock, because this was no longer a quiet defense. It was a public stand. And the senior programmers stared at Leo, some angry, some nervous, while Nora felt a rush of mixed emotions, gratitude, fear, and something deeper she tried to push away. And the CEO ordered an immediate investigation, ending the meeting without judgment. But the damage had already been done, because trust had been shaken. And that evening, as Nora packed her things slowly, unsure if she would be asked to leave the next day, Leo approached her, telling her he believed in her completely. And though his words meant more than she could explain, Nora looked at him with tears. She refused to let fall, saying softly that belief wasn't enough, because she didn't want to survive on someone else's voice. She wanted to stand on her own. And Leo understood, more deeply than ever, that loving someone like Nora meant respecting her strength, not rescuing her from it. And as they parted that night, uncertainty hung heavy between them, because the investigation was just beginning. And the truth, when revealed, would change everything. The investigation moved quickly, but for Nora Hale, every hour felt heavy and endless, because waiting for the truth to surface tested her more than any technical problem ever had. And during those days, she kept her distance from everyone, including Leo Parker, not out of anger, but out of fear that her feelings might weaken her resolve. And when the results finally came, the truth was clear and impossible to ignore, because the system logs showed deliberate changes made late at night by one of the senior programmers, who had openly questioned her. And when confronted, he tried to deny it at first. But the evidence was too strong, and the room filled with an uncomfortable silence as the CEO addressed the team, making it clear that talent meant nothing without integrity, and that jealousy had no place in his company. And as the saboteur was removed from the project and faced serious consequences, many eyes turned toward Nora, some filled with regret, others with shame, and the CEO publicly apologized to her, not just for the accusation, but for allowing an environment where such doubt could grow. And Nora listened quietly, her face calm, but inside, her heart was racing, because this moment wasn't just about being proven right, it was about reclaiming her dignity. And later that day, the CEO offered her a permanent position with greater responsibility, making it clear that her journey from delivery girl to respected professional was complete. Yet as proud as she felt, Nora also felt a strange emptiness, because success alone did not erase the pain she had carried. And that evening, as she stood on the rooftop of the building, watching the city lights flicker below, Leo found her there, hesitating before speaking, because he knew this was not a moment for excuses or easy words. And when he finally spoke, he didn't talk about work or rumors, but about himself, admitting how wrong he had been in the beginning, how his laughter had come from ignorance, and how watching her strength had changed him. And he told her, honestly and without pride, that he cared for her deeply, not because she was brilliant, but because she was brave. And Nora listened, feeling the weight of his words. But instead of answering immediately, she told him the truth too, saying she cared for him, but that she had spent her whole life fighting to be seen as capable, on her own. and she could not step into love if it meant standing in someone else's shadow. And Leo understood, telling her that if love was to exist between them, it would have to walk beside her, not ahead of her. And as they stood there in silence, the city stretching endlessly around them, the audience is left with a powerful pause. Knowing that the final choice has not yet been made, and that the last step of this story will not be about success or revenge, but about respect, timing, and the courage to choose love without losing oneself. The days that followed felt lighter for Nora Hale. Not because everything had suddenly become easy, but because the weight of doubt had finally lifted, and she moved through the office now with quiet confidence. No longer watched with suspicion, but with respect, and when people greeted her, it felt real, earned. And one evening, as the sun dipped low and the building slowly emptied, Nora stood by the large windows, thinking about how far she had come from the girl who once stood near the door with a delivery bag. And Leo Parker approached her, not with urgency or expectation, but with patience, because he knew this moment belonged to her. And when she finally spoke, her voice was calm but firm, saying that she had chosen herself first all her life because no one else ever did. And if she was to choose love now, it had to be because it made her stronger, not smaller. And Leo listened without interrupting, his eyes steady. And she told him that she was ready to try, not because she needed him, but because she wanted to walk beside someone who had learned to respect her journey. And Leo smiled softly, not in victory, but in gratitude, because he understood that this was not a reward, but a partnership, and they stood there together, not holding hands yet, just sharing the quiet understanding that love does not begin with attraction or sympathy, but with growth, change, and the courage to see someone fully. And as the story closes, Nora's life continues, not as a delivery girl who shocked the company, but as a woman who claimed her place through strength and patience, and Leo continues too, no longer defined by pride, but by the ability to learn and change. And the audience is left with a final message that lingers long after the video ends, that real love is not found in being rescued, but in being respected. And sometimes, the people the world laughs at are the ones who teach us how to love better. A few weeks later, the CEO called Nora Hale into his office again, and this time, the assignment was bigger than anything she had faced before. He handed her a real company project that had stalled for months, a project that involved not just coding, but understanding the entire workflow. And as Nora looked at the papers and digital files in front of her, she felt a rush of both fear and excitement, because she knew that this project could either prove herself completely or crush the fragile confidence she had built. And when she stepped out of the office, she realized everyone was watching, some with curiosity, others with thinly veiled hostility, and Leo Parker was there too, noticing the tension in her shoulders and the way her eyes scanned the files. And though he knew she could handle it, he also knew the office wouldn't make it easy, because jealousy had reached a boiling point. With some programmers whispering that she was taking work that should have been theirs, and that she was only surviving because the CEO favored her. And the first day of the project proved their point, as hidden problems appeared, files went missing, software crashed, and some team members subtly sabotaged her progress. Yet Nora remained calm, quietly asking questions, testing solutions, and refusing to let their scheme stop her. While Leo watched, sometimes offering guidance, sometimes stepping in to correct errors that were deliberately planted, and the way he defended her quietly, without showing off or embarrassing anyone, began to shift how she saw him, because she realized he wasn't just a colleague, but an ally, someone who could see her potential and quietly protect it without taking credit. And as the project progressed, the pressure mounted, with the CEO checking in daily, demanding progress and insights. And the whispers grew louder, some questioning if Nora really belonged in the team. And one afternoon, when a particularly difficult problem threatened to ruin a week of work, Nora stayed late, sitting under the dim office lights, trying solution after solution, her fingers stiff from typing, her eyes heavy, and Leo stayed beside her, not touching the keyboard but simply watching, his presence offering quiet support. And when she finally solved the issue, relief washed over her, and Leo smiled, proud in a way that went beyond admiration, a warmth that reached deep inside both of them. And for a brief moment, the world outside the office, the whispers, the jealousy, the doubts disappeared, leaving only the two of them in silent celebration. And as the days continued, the office hostility became almost predictable, with people trying to trip her up. But each time, Nora faced it calmly. And each time, Leo silently helped, guiding her without overshadowing her. And this silent partnership slowly became visible to the CEO, who started praising her initiative publicly, causing murmurs among the other programmers. And the tension escalated when Leo openly supported her during a team meeting, explaining a technical choice she made and validating her reasoning in front of everyone. And though some rolled their eyes or whispered sarcastic remarks, Others began to see her differently, and Nora felt something she hadn't felt before. Not only respect, but the beginnings of trust, warmth, and a faint flutter in her chest when she glanced at Leo, who had once mocked her and now quietly stood by her side. Unwavering, and the culmination of weeks of work finally arrived on the last day of the project. When Nora presented her findings to the CEO and team, explaining every solution, every choice, every risk she had taken, and the CEO listened intently, nodding and smiling, clearly impressed, while the jealous programmers were forced to acknowledge her skill, though grudgingly, and when the CEO finally stood and applauded, announcing that the project was a success thanks to her leadership and insight, a wave of relief and pride washed over Nora, and Leo, standing near her, brushed a loose strand of hair from her face almost unconsciously, and she looked at him, noticing the tenderness in his eyes for the first time, and in that silent glance, without words, both felt the spark of something deeper, a bond formed not from sympathy or convenience, but from respect, trust, and shared struggle. And while the office buzzed with congratulations, quiet gossip, and lingering jealousy, Nora and Leo knew, in the back of their minds, that the story of the delivery girl who had once been mocked had taken a turn no one could have predicted. And now, not only had she earned her place, but something delicate and real had begun to grow between them, ready to bloom despite the obstacles waiting. In the chapters ahead, the success of the project changed many things inside the company. But it also made the tension heavier, because success attracts attention, and attention attracts enemies. And for Nora Hale, the praise she received from the CEO felt unreal, almost fragile, as if it could disappear at any moment, because she had lived long enough knowing that good moments never stayed for people like her. And the very next day, the office felt colder, quieter, filled with looks that no longer mocked openly, but judged silently. And while some people congratulated her with forced smiles, others avoided her completely, and Leo Parker noticed it all, noticing how Nora stayed calm on the outside while carrying the weight alone. And for the first time, he felt anger not for himself, but for her, because he realized how unfair the world had been to someone who only wanted a chance. And as the CEO continued to involve Nora in higher-level discussions, the jealousy among a few senior programmers turned into something darker, something dangerous, and rumors began spreading that Nora had copied ideas, that she was being favored because of sympathy, and even worse, whispers that her closeness to Leo was the real reason behind her rise. And when Nora overheard these rumors in the hallway, they hit her harder than laughter ever did, because they attacked her dignity, the one thing she had protected all her life. And that evening, she stayed late again, pretending to work while fighting the pain quietly, and Leo found her there, staring at her screen without typing. And when he gently asked what was wrong, she didn't answer at first. But he was admitting hurt felt like weakness, but when she finally spoke, her voice was steady but tired, saying she didn't want her success to be questioned, didn't want her name connected to anyone else's shadow. And Leo listened silently, understanding that this moment wasn't about love, but about respect. And though his heart wanted to reassure her with words, he held back, knowing she needed space more than comfort. And that night, as Nora walked home alone under the city lights, she wondered if proving herself had truly freed her, or if it had simply changed the shape of her struggle. And the audience is left with growing tension, knowing that something big is coming, something that will force both Nora and Leo to face the truth of what they feel and who they want to be. The next few days passed slowly for Nora Hale, but inside her mind, everything moved fast, because the problem the CEO had given her stayed with her every waking moment, following her through crowded buses, noisy streets, and long delivery hours. And at night, when her small room finally became quiet, she opened her laptop and stared at the lines of code like they were a puzzle that could change her life. Yet fear walked beside hope, because she knew how easily dreams could break. And inside the office, things were not calm either, as whispers continued to grow louder. And some programmers joked about the delivery girl test, while others stayed silent, watching closely. And Leo Parker found himself caught between those two sides, because he wanted to believe in Nora, but every time he defended her, he felt the eyes on his back, judging him, questioning his loyalty. And one afternoon, the CEO called Leo into his office and asked him to quietly observe Nora's progress, not to help her, not to protect her, but to see how she worked under pressure. And Leo agreed, though the request made him uncomfortable, because it felt like spying on someone who trusted him. And when Leo later met Nora in the empty conference room where she was allowed to work on the test, he noticed the dark circles under her eyes, and the way she held her coffee cup with tired hands. And though he wanted to offer help, he remembered the CEO's words and stayed silent, choosing instead to simply sit nearby, pretending to review documents while secretly watching her think, watching how she talked softly to herself. How she paused and started again. How she didn't panic when something failed, but calmly tried. Another way, and this quiet strength affected Leo more than any dramatic success could, because it showed him how much effort lived behind her calm face. And as days passed, jealousy began to grow among the team, especially from those who felt threatened, and one of them openly complained that giving chances to outsiders was unfair, while another hinted that Nora was only getting attention because she was different, and these words reached Nora too, though no one said them directly. And each time she heard a laugh behind her back or felt a sudden silence when she entered a room, old wounds reopened, reminding her why she had once stopped believing in people. Yet, she didn't quit, because this time, walking away would hurt more than staying. And one evening, when the building was almost empty, Nora's laptop suddenly froze, erasing hours of work, and the shock made her hands shake as she stared at the blank screen. Fighting tears, because she knew she didn't have enough time to start over, and Leah saw it happen, saw her shoulders stiffen as she tried to stay strong. And this time he broke his silence, kneeling beside her and calmly helping her recover part of the lost work. Not by doing it for her, but by guiding her, respecting her process. And in that quiet moment, something warm passed between them, something built on trust rather than pride. And when Nora thanked him, her voice soft but sincere, Leo felt a strange happiness, the kind that comes from doing the right thing without expecting anything back. And as the deadline approached, pressure grew heavier, and on the final day, Nora stood once again in front of the CEO and the team, her heart racing as she explained her solution step by step, her voice steady despite the fear. And when she finished, silence filled the room. Not the mocking silence of before, but a thoughtful one, and the CEO leaned back, asking questions that tested not just her answer, but her understanding. And Nora answered honestly, admitting what she wasn't sure about and explaining what she was. And that honesty impressed the CEO more than perfection ever could. And when the meeting ended, the CEO announced that Nora would stay for a trial period, learning and contributing, not as a delivery girl, but as a junior analyst. And shock rippled through the room, because this was no longer just a test, it was a door opening. And while some clapped politely and others stayed quiet, Leo smiled openly, proud in a way he hadn't felt in years. And later that day, as Nora packed her things to leave, unsure whether to feel happy or scared, Leo walked beside her and told her she deserved this chance. And Nora looked at him, really looked at him, seeing not the man who once laughed, but the man who had changed. And though neither of them spoke of love yet, something gentle settled between them, like a promise, waiting for the right moment to be spoken. And the story moves forward with one clear truth, that when respect is earned, love often follows. But not without trials, waiting just ahead. As Nora Hale settled into her new role, she quickly realized that the office she had once been invisible in was not going to be easy to navigate, because the same people who had laughed at her were now watching. Her every move was sharper eyes and whispered words that carried both doubt and challenge. And among them, some programmers openly tried to undermine her, giving her incomplete files, setting unrealistic deadlines, and questioning her every decision. And though she could feel the tension pressing against her like a heavy weight, she refused to let it break her, because she had worked too hard to be pushed away by jealousy. And Leo Parker, who had once mocked her quietly, along with the others, now found himself torn between loyalty to his colleagues and his growing respect and something more for Nora. Because every time he saw her work calmly, thinking clearly, while others whispered doubts, he felt a strange pride, mixed with guilt, knowing he had been wrong before. And one afternoon, as Nora struggled to understand a particularly complex problem, one of the jealous programmers named Simon deliberately gave her a corrupted file, claiming it was real. And when the system failed under her test, the team smirked, whispering that maybe she really wasn't ready for this world. And Nora felt her stomach twist, a mixture of shame and fear, because she knew how close she was to proving herself, and how a silently one failure could undo everything. But then, Leo stepped forward, quietly intercepting her, taking the time to look at the corrupted file, explaining that the problem wasn't her code. And together, they fixed it, not just saving the project, but also showing the CEO how she had handled pressure without panicking. And as the CEO nodded in approval, he quietly asked Leo to keep mentoring her, knowing that this partnership could bring unexpected results. And as the day ended, Nora walked out of the office, exhausted but determined, feeling the weight of scrutiny and yet a flicker of hope because at least one person believed in her. And outside, Leo matched her pace, walking beside her through the empty streets, not saying much, but giving her a quiet presence that spoke louder than words. And as they approached her small apartment, he stopped and said softly that she had done better than anyone expected. And Nora looked at him, surprised not only by the praise but by the warmth in his eyes. And for the first time, she wondered if this quiet man, who had once judged her, could be someone she could trust. And the next day, rumors began to swirl faster. Some people claiming the CEO had given her a special favor. Others whispering that Leo Parker was somehow helping her behind the scenes. And the jealousy grew, turning polite smiles into thinly veiled hostility. But Nora refused to react, focusing instead on the work in front of her, proving daily that her skills were real. And slowly, a pattern began to form, because the more the others tried to undermine her, the stronger she became, and Leo noticed it, watching as she calmly solved problems that had stumped even the most experienced staff. And in moments when no one was looking, he found himself catching her gaze, noticing her concentration, her small smile when a solution worked, the way her eyes lit up with pride, and he felt emotions stirring that confused him because they were stronger than respect or admiration. And at the same time, he struggled with guilt for feeling this way, knowing that others would judge him if they noticed. And one evening, after a long day of work, Nora sat in the quiet break room, her shoulders tired. Then Leo came to sit across from her, offering coffee and small talk, and slowly, carefully, they began sharing small pieces of their lives. Him talking about coding problems that frustrated him. Her talking about the nights she stayed awake learning on her old laptop. And in that sharing, something delicate started to form, a connection based on understanding, not just attraction. And as the weeks passed, Nora noticed that Leo was always nearby when she needed guidance, never overbearing, never claiming credit. And Leo realized that for the first time in his life, he wanted to protect someone for no reason other than caring, and the office drama continued. Threats and whispers growing louder, but Nora and Leo quietly grew stronger together, their bond unseen but unshakable. And by the end of part 3, the audience is left with a powerful tension. Will jealousy destroy their budding trust before it can grow into something more? Or will these two unlikely allies turn challenge into love, while the office around them struggles to keep up with the brilliance of a girl who was once just a delivery girl and the programmer who finally saw her worth? By the next morning, the story of what happened in the meeting room had spread through the company like quiet fire, moving from desk to desk, changing shape with every whisper. And some said the delivery girl had fixed the system alone. Others said the CEO had tested her on purpose, and a few claimed it was luck, nothing more. But no one could ignore the fact that her name, Nora Hale, was now being spoken inside a place where people like her were usually invisible. And while the office returned to its usual rhythm of typing, calls, and meetings, Leo Parker felt restless, in a way he hadn't felt before, because every time he looked at his screen, he remembered the moment the error disappeared, the calm way Nora had spoken, and the uncomfortable truth that she had been right while he had been wrong. And that thought followed him through the day, refusing to leave. While somewhere across the city, Nora moved through her own quiet routine, delivering food under the sun, riding buses, climbing stairs, her phone buzzing with new orders. Yet her mind kept returning to the office, to the faces that laughed, to the silence after the system worked, and to the CEO's eyes when he asked her name. And even though part of her felt proud, a larger part felt afraid, because attention had never brought good things into her life before. And that evening, in her small room with peeling paint and a single window, she opened her old laptop, its fan loud and tired, and practiced coding like she always did. But tonight, her hands shook slightly, not from fear of failure, but from the memory of being seen. And back at the office, Leo stayed late, pretending to work while actually replaying the scene again and again, wondering why her words had stayed with him, why her honesty had felt heavier than any technical explanation. And when he finally left the building, he saw her near the entrance, adjusting her delivery bag, preparing to leave. And for a moment, he considered walking past her like before, returning to the comfort of distance. But something inside him pushed him forward, and he stopped her, calling her name softly. And Nora turned, surprised that someone like him even remembered it. And Leo thanked her, not in a proud way, but in a quiet, awkward one, admitting that she had helped them more than anyone realized. And Nora nodded politely, unsure what to say, unsure if his words were real or just polite guilt. And as they stood there in the fading light, surrounded by the noise of the city, both felt a strange shift, a fragile connection, formed not by love yet, but by curiosity, respect, and questions neither of them were ready to ask. And as they went their separate ways that night, unaware of how deeply their paths were about to cross again, the audience is left with a single thought hanging in the air, that sometimes the smallest moments are the beginning of the biggest changes. The following afternoon, just as Nora was finishing her last delivery of the day and thinking she could finally rest, her phone rang with an unknown number, and when she answered, a calm voice asked if she was Nora Hale and requested her to return to the tech building for a short conversation. And though fear immediately tightened her chest, she agreed. telling herself that avoiding things had never protected her before. And when she arrived, the office felt different, quieter, more watchful, and she was guided to a small meeting room where the CEO waited, not behind a large desk, but seated casually, as if he wanted the conversation to feel human. And he explained that he had been thinking about her since the system failure, not because she fixed it, but because she noticed it. And he wanted to understand how. And Nora spoke honestly again, telling him about teaching herself at night, about failing many times, about being laughed at before. And the CEO listened without interrupting, then offered her something unexpected. Not a job yet, but a test, a real problem the company was facing. Something even his best team hadn't solved. And he told her there would be no pressure, no promise, only a chance. And as Nora walked out of the room holding the printed problem statement, her hands trembled, not from fear alone, but from the weight of possibility. And outside the meeting room, Leo waited, pretending he was just passing by. And when their eyes met, Nora saw uncertainty in his face, the kind that comes before change. And Leo asked quietly what the CEO wanted, and Nora told him the truth. And in that moment, Leo realized the company was standing at a crossroad, and so was he, because supporting Nora could cost him his standing, while ignoring her would protect his pride. And as he watched her walk away, carrying not just a piece of paper, but a chance she had never been given before, Leo felt something shift inside him. Something deeper than curiosity, something that felt like responsibility. And as night fell over the city, and the lights inside the building stayed on, the story paused at a powerful question. Not about code or success, but about whether people are brave enough to change when the truth challenges who they think they are. No one noticed Nora Hale when she entered the tall glass building that morning, and that was normal for her, because people like her were trained by life to move quietly, to avoid eye contact, and to finish their work without being seen. Yet, today felt different from the very first step she took inside, because the air felt heavier, the kind of air that comes before something breaks. And Nora felt it in her chest as she adjusted the food delivery bag on her shoulder and walked toward the reception desk, her shoes making soft sounds against the polished floor, while the people around her moved fast with laptops, phones, and confident smiles, wearing clothes that screamed success. And none of them looked at her twice, except a group of programmers standing near the coffee machine, laughing loudly. And among them was Leo Parker, one of the company's top programmers, known for his sharp mind and even sharper tongue. And when his eyes briefly landed on Nora, he smirked without thinking, because to him, she was just another delivery girl, another background character in his busy, important world. And as Nora waited for the receptionist to sign the delivery form, she heard one of the programmers whisper something about how even delivery girls are getting early access to this place now, and laughter followed, light but cutting, and Nora pretended not to hear it, just like she always did, because reacting never helped, and silence had become her shield over the years. But what they didn't know was that Nora's calm face hid a mind that never stopped thinking, a mind that noticed patterns, errors, and problems even when she didn't want to. And as she stood there waiting, her eyes accidentally drifted toward a large screen on the wall, showing lines of code and error messages flashing red. And even though she told herself to look away, her brain had already started working, already seeing something that felt wrong, something familiar, something she had seen before, late at night in her small rented room while practicing on an old laptop that overheated if used for more than an hour. And suddenly, the laughter behind her stopped, replaced by raised voices, because inside the main meeting room, something had gone terribly wrong. The system had crashed during a live presentation meant for the CEO, and panic rushed through the office like a fast-moving wave. Chairs scraped the floor, footsteps hurried, and the same programmers who had laughed moments ago now looked tense and confused, including Leo Parker, whose confident expression faded as he stared at his screen, refreshing again and again, hoping the error would disappear, but it didn't. And as managers started whispering and assistants ran back and forth, Nora stood frozen near the wall, still holding the delivery bag, forgotten by everyone, yet her eyes were locked on the error code. And her heart started beating faster, because she knew that error, she had seen it before, and she knew what caused it. And without meaning to, without planning, she softly whispered, almost to herself, that loop is calling itself without an exit. And the words were barely louder than a breath. But in the sudden silence of the room, they landed like a stone dropped in water, and Leo Parker turned around sharply, his eyes narrowing as they landed on Nora, disbelief written all over his face. And someone laughed again, louder this time, saying, "Did the delivery girl just try to debug our system?" And the laughter spread, but this time it felt forced, nervous, because the problem was still there, and the CEO was still waiting. And Nora felt heat rush to her face, realizing what she had said out loud, realizing how foolish it must sound, coming from someone like her, and she lowered her head. wishing she could disappear. But before anyone could wave her away or tell her to leave, a calm, firm voice came from the doorway. A voice that carried authority without needing volume. And the room went silent instantly as the CEO stepped inside, his sharp eyes scanning the chaos, then stopping on Nora, standing alone with a delivery bag and a face full of quiet embarrassment. And he asked a simple question that changed everything. Who said that line about the loop? And no one answered, because the programmers were too shocked and too proud to point toward a delivery girl. And Nora felt her throat tighten, every second stretched longer, until finally, she lifted her head slightly and spoke with honesty, not confidence, saying, "I did. Sir, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt," and the room held its breath, waiting for the CEO to laugh, to scold her, or to ask her to leave. But instead, he looked at her closely, not at her clothes or her job badge, but at her eyes, as if searching for something deeper, and Leo Parker felt something strange twist inside his chest. A feeling he couldn't name, because for the first time, he wasn't sure if the person standing in front of him was just a delivery girl after all. And as the CEO asked Nora to repeat what she said, slowly, clearly, the balance of the room shifted, and the story that began with laughter was about to turn into something no one there was ready for. The silence in the room felt heavy after the CEO asked Nora to repeat herself. And for a moment, she thought her voice would fail her, because standing there with everyone watching made her feel smaller than ever. Yet something inside her refused to let her step back, so she took a slow breath and explained again, carefully, using simple words, saying that the system was stuck because a part of the code kept calling itself without a proper stop. And as she spoke, the programmers exchanged looks filled with doubt and irritation. Because how could someone like her understand something they had spent years studying? And Leo Parker crossed his arms, his face tight with disbelief. And finally he spoke, his tone sharp but controlled, saying that the issue was far more complex than what she was suggesting, that they had already checked for basic mistakes, and that guessing in front of the CEO was dangerous. And the word guessing stung Nora more than she expected, because she wasn't guessing, she was sure, but certainty meant nothing without status. And the CEO looked between them, noticing the tension, then calmly asked Leo to explain the current situation. And Leo did, using technical words and confident language, painting a picture of a rare system failure, something only experienced professionals could solve. And the CEO listened, nodded once, then turned back to Nora and asked her a question that surprised everyone, asking how she knew about this kind of error. And Nora hesitated, because the truth felt too personal, too weak, but she answered honestly, saying she practiced coding at night, that she learned on her own, that she never finished college because life didn't allow it. And a few quiet laughs escaped from the back of the room. Not loud, but enough to cut, and Nora felt her hands shake slightly as she held onto the delivery bag, reminding herself she wasn't there to prove her worth. Yet somehow she already was, and the CEO raised his hand, silencing the room, and said that ideas should not be judged by where they come from, only by whether they work. And then he gave Nora 1 minute, just one, to point out exactly where she believed the problem was. And the room reacted instantly, shock spreading across faces, because 1 minute could cost the company everything. And Leo felt anger rise in his chest, mixed with something else he didn't want to admit, fear, because if Shia was right, it would mean he had been blind. And Nora walked slowly toward the screen, every step feeling like a test. And she pointed at a section of the code, explaining that during a recent update, a small change had removed the exit condition, causing the system to loop endlessly. And she suggested adding a simple break to test it, not as a final fix, but as proof. And the CEO nodded and told Leo to try it. And for a second, Leo didn't move, his pride fighting his duty, but the pressure of the CEO's gaze forced him to sit down and type exactly what Nora said, his fingers moving fast but his heart racing. And when he ran the test, nothing happened at first. And a few people smirked, ready to laugh again, and Nora's chest tightened, thinking she had been wrong, thinking she had humiliated herself for nothing. But then the red airline disappeared, replaced by green text, and the system responded. Slowly at first, then fully, and the room froze, staring at the screen in disbelief, because it worked, and the silence that followed was louder than any laughter before it. And Leo stared at the code, then at Nora, his mind struggling to catch up with what just happened. And the CEO smiled, slightly, not with pride, but with interest, and asked Nora where she learned to think like that. And Nora answered simply, saying that when you have little time and fewer chances, you learn to see problems faster, because mistakes cost you more. And something about her words stayed in the air, making people uncomfortable. And the CEO thanked her and told the team to continue fixing the system fully, then turned back to Nora and asked her name. and when she said Nora Hale, he repeated it slowly, as if memorizing it, and told her she could leave for now, but that they would talk again, and just like that, the moment ended, and people returned to their work, whispering quietly, some impressed, some annoyed, some confused. And Nora walked out of the room with her delivery bag still on her shoulder, her legs feeling weak, unsure whether she had just changed her life or made things harder. While Leo stayed behind, staring at the screen but no longer seeing code. Only the calm face of a delivery girl who had seen something he hadn't, and for the first time in a long time, his confidence felt shaken. Not broken, but questioned. And as the day moved on,